So let's get started. My name is Heather Miller. I am the executive director of the Scala Center at EPFL. And as you can tell, this talk is all about the Scala Center. I'm really, really proud today to be presenting this thing that we worked so hard to put together in the last few months. And I hope that everybody here will think, just like I do, that, hey, it's a cool thing and a good idea. So I hope I can convince you of that. But just to give a quick one-line intro to what it is, the Scala Center is a new not-for-profit center established at EPFL. So this is kind of weird, what this thing is. We launched about a month and a half ago, so we're very new. And I'm going to go through, in the rest of this talk, some of the things that we've been doing, just before and since we've launched, and some of the things that we are going to go on to do, and how we're organized, and how we should be doing things that should be hopefully affecting you as developers in the end. But first, the first 2 points I'd like to make is that this is a not-for-profit thing, as is very bold on the screen, and that it's established at EPFL. So EPFL is a university. I know you guys might have heard EPFL here or there somewhere. Maybe you don't know what it is. It's a university in Switzerland. We have nothing to do with TypeSafe or LightBin. People have kind of been confusing us for years now. We are very different. This is where we are. This is what our university looks like. We are nowhere near San Francisco. And we don't do startup things. Before the Scala Center existed, we were a research group. Martin was the professor in this group. He is the professor, I hope. Are you still the professor? I hope so. He was my advisor for my PhD. He advises several other people. We all contributed to Scala. Scala was developed here, actually in this beautiful view. Martin always had some good inspiration when he was hacking on his compiler. And actually, this is actually the inspiration for the Scala logo. This is a building that some of our offices are in. So this is EPFL, and the Scala Center is at EPFL. It's at a university. So why a center? Martin tried to sort of give some hints why we should have a center nowadays. One was while Scala is growing in popularity. If you look at the last few years, even in the last year, we've this is a plot from Indeed.com about basically job ads mentioning Scala. And if you look in the last year, we've basically doubled the number of job ads that are mentioning Scala. And actually what I accidentally found that was, I think, kind of funny is that Scala is actually more common in job ads than advertisements for data scientists even, which I was sort of surprised. Maybe this isn't true, but I thought, wow, that's cool. And also, there's a funny correlation here between data science and Scala, which I suspect to have something to do with Spark, probably. If you're interested in why that might be the case, quick shout out to Dean Wampler and Andy Petrella, who will be giving a talk actually in the very next session about today, arguing that this is indeed true, that Scala is sort of the lingua franca for data science. Maybe he can explain why this is the case. But anyway, the point is that Scala is growing, right? And actually also, despite some like grumbles that we've been hearing over on social media in the last few years, it's actually one of the top 5 most loved languages, according to this. I think it's very influential. This Stack Overflow developer survey. Stack Overflow surveyed more than 50,000 developers about basically everything, about the languages that they use in their jobs, their job titles, even up to like demographic information, how much people get paid. And they found that Scala is not one of the most dreaded, it's actually one of the most loved languages, which is very cool. And that's also not to mention, something I think is also neat, not to mention the fact that Scala is tied with Spark for being the highest paid skill in the industry right now here in the US, which is also pretty cool. So obviously there's a demand if the price is so high for a Scala developer. So Scala is growing. And it's successful. I think we can all agree that Scala is becoming very successful, but unlike every other very successful open source programming language or framework, until now we've had really no not-for-profit vendor-neutral sort of steward thing that sort of takes care and helps Scala and its ecosystem grow. LightBin does an amazing job guaranteeing stability of the 2.x compiler. They've been dealing with all kinds of very important things like Java 8 compatibility, efforts at speeding up Scala C, being steadfast on leading the charge on releases, which is a ridiculously difficult job, by the way. Anybody who has ever released something used by a lot of developers, it's extremely not easy. And everything from bug fixes to the process and how to do it. They brought binary compatibility to Scala. I mean, we didn't really have that before the type-safe LightBin team brought it to us. So that's really great. The only thing is, Scala is getting to be a little bit bigger than the 2.x compiler alone. We now compile to JavaScript and hopefully soon to LLVM. And also, speaking of LLVM, if you're curious what that even means, Dennis, where are you? Dennis is giving a talk tomorrow, right? Tomorrow afternoon about his project called Scala Native, which is about compiling down to LLVM. So we've got all of these cool things kind of happening. We also have, we need to invest effort in other places. In addition to alternate backends, the standard library needs a little bit of attention. As Martin mentioned yesterday, there's this idea of splitting into core and platform. We need to invest some effort in the community and ecosystem that we haven't really done so much in the last few years. And of course, we have this awesome but also confusing Dotty thing, like on the horizon. What are we going to do about this? We need to invest some effort in some of these things. So why a center? Well, that's why. So the Scala Center has been founded with two goals, two prime goals. One is open source community, and I'm going to go into exactly what I mean by that, and the other is education. So we have two main foci. But if you guys walk away with anything, I really hope that you walk away with this little sentence here, because as a not-for-profit center, we are really, our stakeholders are you guys. Our stakeholders are everybody. So it's really for the good of everybody. And when I say community, I mean everybody. So at this point, I think it's really important to note that whether you're a big, very slow-moving kind of enterprise company, or you're this brilliant weekend tinkerer that's translating academic functional programming ideas from some Oleg paper to Scala, whoever you are, the Scala Center, as a nonprofit steward, is committed to acting in the interest of really everybody. So what we were trying to do is trying to develop things like tools or change or lead sort of community processes, do this core platform split that we had mentioned earlier. All of these things should affect everybody, we hope. So this is our mission statement. And I'm just going to hammer this into your heads, okay? Ready? Let's go. So point one, independently guide and support the entire Scala community. So like I said, everybody, not just one or the other group, but really all of us. Coordinate and develop open source libraries and tools for the benefit of the overall Scala community. And of course, as I alluded to, providing deep, quality, and freely available educational materials for Scala. So, two goals, open source community and education. I'm going to start by going through what I mean by education real quick before I go into the open source side of things. But just as a quick show of hands, who's taken the Scala MOOCs in this room? Cool, so that's really like 80% of people. Did they help you? Raise your hand if you really liked it. Okay, actually, cool. I'm happy. Sometimes, a teaching style isn't the best for somebody and, they're not happy, but it looks like most of the hands stayed up, so that's really great. So far, to date, we've had over 400,000 people register for our courses, and we actually have one of the highest completion rates across all MOOCs their size, and this is what I mean. I don't know if you can see the axes here. So the x-axis is the number of people enrolled in the course for one run of the course, right? So the Scala MOOC was 50,000 people, or about. There are courses that exist on the planet that have up to 200,000 people enrolled in them, and then the y-axis here is the percentage of people who completed the course. So as you can see, everything sort of floats down to the bottom left corner here. Courses, MOOCs have a tendency to be not so big, and as they get bigger, have very, very low completion rates in the 5% or so range. And where are we on that graph? We're right here. We're the highest. At the time that this graph was created, which I checked it last night, I don't know, this is us. We're the highest, at the highest point for the 50,000 group. We have around 19.2% of people completed the course that we first ran in 2012. So we have a really high completion rate, which is really cool. So that shows that people are sticking with our courses for whatever reason, right? And as I think the show of hands showed is these MOOCs that we've developed, they serve as really the main free educational resource for learning Scala. It's pretty in-depth and project-heavy and example-rich, and a lot of people learn how to sort of program with this thing. So, we also might have noticed, many of you, if you've tried to look at the MOOCs recently, we don't have them running anymore. They went down several months ago, and they haven't come back up yet. So, what are we doing? We're launching new MOOCs. Not just the same 2 that we had launched before, but we're launching more. So Coursera has this new thing called a specialization. So it's like a mini degree. And we now have 4 courses. 2 of them are new. I'm going to tell you what's in them in a second. And we're working on a capstone project to finish off that coursework. So you have this, I don't know actually exactly how many months it is. It's probably like a 3-month-long, 4-month-long, if you do the hours, recommended, like miniature degree in Scala. And it finishes with this nice capstone project, right? Coursera, actually, if you guys remember the old Coursera interface, it was pretty, wonky sometimes. They have a whole new platform that's really nice and convenient for students. I think it's really an amazing improvement. And the new courses that we're launching soon are on demand, so you don't have to do this thing anymore where you wait for this twice-a-year, 7-week-long course. There's just like 2 windows or I think we only ever did 2 per year, where you have these 7-week sessions twice per year. You don't have to wait for these things to start anymore. You can now start anytime and keep your own schedule and submit whenever you want. You can go away for a month and come back to it later. It's totally on demand now. And so this is what the specialization page looks like. When you get there, I just want to point out that there are basically 2 routes. You can take each individual course for free, as you did in years past, but you can also do it verified and get this mini degree, and you pay a little bit of money per each course, basically. So that's the new thing. That's what we're about ready to launch. And just like before, we do our automated grading, where we you submit your assignment, your thing via SBT, and you check Coursera's interface, and then you get this feedback. For example, this one's complaining that somebody put vals in their or vars in their code, so they got docked style points. So we check both correctness and style, right? Like in this case, don't use vars, otherwise we'll steal points from you. So we do this automated grading thing. We're going to do it across all 4 courses. We're working out whether or not we can do this in the capstone project. We'll see how that goes. But these are the courses. So I'll talk about what's in each one of them in a moment. But the first 2 are comprised of material that have been in the courses that you've seen so far if you've taken the courses on Coursera. So the first one is Functional Programming Principles in Scala. That's mostly ProgFun, or the same named course that you might have taken in the last few years. The next course is called Functional Program Design in Scala. This is made up of a mixture of some material out of reactive and some material out of this functional programming course, the old version. And then we have these 2 new courses, Parallel Programming and Big Data Analysis in Scala and Spark. Parallel Programming is taught by Victor Kunchak and Alex Prokopets, and I'm teaching the Big Data Analysis in Scala and Spark course. So if you haven't taken the MOOC on Coursera, the Functional Programming MOOC, this is really like the quintessential Scala course, if you ever want to recommend anything to your friends. Really, so this is kind of what the course aims to teach you. So basic principles of functional programming, like what is functional, what is imperative, how to write purely functional programs using recursion, pattern matching, higher order functions, how to combine functional programming with objects and classes, because of course everything is an object in Scala, and then how to design immutable data structures and reason about properties of functions, and a little bit about generic types and the type system. Okay, so that course maybe you're all familiar with. The next one, which is a mixture of material from the old reactive course and ProgFun course, is all about applying design principles in functional programs and combining functions and state in one program. And also, I think what's most interesting is here, writing simple functional reactive applications. So we have a module on timely effects and futures and whatnot. But if you can see here, the course begins with for expressions, monads, goes to lazy evaluation, functions and state, and then it ends with this, nice little thing on futures. And oh, Eric Meyer is also co-teaching this, like I said, because we've taken some material out of the reactive MOOC. So that's the two MOOCs that kind of, we already knew the course material. New MOOC, it's called Parallel Programming. So what are we teaching in this one? If you guys are familiar with any sort of parallelism, it's mostly it's mostly data parallelism, but we teach task and data parallelism. Really just to go through sort of the main bullet points, the basics of parallel programming, the basics of parallel computing and parallel program analysis, basics of sort of task parallelism, and basic parallel algorithms. We go really in depth, I think, into data parallelism and Scala parallel collections, teaching about how to reduce things in, like parallel aggregations and whatnot, and data structures for parallel computing. Alex, of course, is the most Scala data structure person I know. So of course he's going to teach a little bit about how to do parallel computing on data structures. And finally, we have this course called Big Data Analysis with Scala and Spark. It's a 3-week course. So basically, the idea is we take the concepts taught in the previous course on data parallelism, because probably around, I don't know, 60–70% of that course is about data parallelism, and it goes through how parallel collections work and how they're designed. And we extend that to the distributed case, because of course once you leave shared memory, things change, concerns change. Programming model changes slightly, even though it looks kind of the same on first glance, right? So we try to explain how that works. We go through the basics of Spark's programming model, and we show kind of the differences that happen when you make this transition from shared memory to distributed. And then we go through how to manipulate data with Spark and Scala, how to express algorithms that you might want to do in sort of a data analysis task in a functional style. And we recognize throughout the course how to avoid stuff like shuffles, which are always, dangerous if you're trying to do something distributed. So when will they start? May 23rd, we hope. This is something that we are working out with Coursera. They've given us this date. I hope it sticks. We've been trying to launch all this month, but we believe that this is the final date. So mark your calendars. The first 3 courses are planned to start on May 23rd. And if you're interested in any of them and you want to stay up to date, I would recommend that you visit the Scala Center webpage and leave your name and email address, and we will update you with an email when we know exactly when things are starting, etc. We will hit that email address. But yeah. Okay, so now open source, because I think this is, what most people in this room care about, right? So we think that much can be improved on the open source side of Scala. So the Scala Center seeks to not only improve sort of the landscape of the libraries around Scala, and like I said, I'll go through that momentarily, but we'd also really like to sort of substantially grow the community that we have of open source contributors, not to just Scala, but to libraries and the ecosystem in general, right? So Scala libraries out there. We think that it's important to also try and coordinate and direct sort of open source development of libraries and tools for the broad benefit of everybody. And as I'll show you in a second, we're trying to find ways to provide scaffolding to help people find each other, help the community develop, publish, find, and evaluate Scala libraries. So I think one point that I'd really like to highlight is that while we'd like to contribute libraries and tools ourselves, we really also like, as a main big goal, is to provide sort of scaffolding, infrastructure, and guidance to sort of the community as a whole, so that for the good of all projects can strive as well. So we want to provide all kinds of, mostly structure and infrastructure where we can, so that other projects can grow and people can benefit from them all. We have a philosophy, or at least I have a little philosophy that I'm trying to realize here to achieve this idea of there being sort of infrastructure and structure that people can sort of join and figure out how to, get their library to grow and get contributors to it. So I have some proposals about how we should first try to achieve this. What I've been really trying to do with the first 1 or 2 projects that we've kind of been working on in the Scala Center is to try and grow like a little community of contributors around it. Again, I'll go through a couple of the examples of the initiatives that we're working on in a second. But for example, what we'd like to provide to these sort of initiatives that we're trying to push is, for example, hardware, infrastructure. We want to make sure that that's available for a project so that there's a machine that something can run on, right? We want to help projects be organized and be broken down into pieces so that other people can help with them. So other people just who would wish to contribute in the community can come and take a piece and start trying to participate. And for some of these projects that, like I said, that we really want to see exist, we'll put 1 or 2 Scala Center staff members on it to engage and participate through development. So the whole point is that we want to build teams with people in the community and give contributors that are on these projects some control and the ability to contribute and change and sort of shape the vision of some of these things. So we'd like to try and help sort of in that sense, organize projects. So since we want to maximize sort of the benefit of people's efforts, we want to work together to grow something that we can all sort of depend on, and in particular this process. So just to reiterate, we want for some of the projects that I'm going to present to you, we're trying to grow a little team of core contributors and committers, so that consisting of Scala Center staffs and folks from also the community, not just us. For the first 2 projects I'm going to cover, we started doing this by having little 30-minute weekly project meetings around other people's schedules to keep it concise and figure out what next steps are, plan each member's goals and whatnot, and to sync on each other's availabilities and activities. We also have dedicated Slack channels to these projects, so it's nice for being able to always sort of ping the group, ask questions, to broadcast sort of daily, like, hey, yeah, this thing works finally, and preventing people from hopefully getting stuck, and then sharing some jokes sometimes. So this is kind of the structure that I'm trying to see if it works. It's an experiment right now. But that's kind of the philosophy for some of these open source projects. But you might ask, okay, well, wait, how does this work then? How do you have staff members that should be able to spend time on things like this? Where does that money come from? So maybe I should take a quick aside and say and try to cover of the sort of overall structure of our organization. What kind of organization are we? It's a good question. All I told you so far is that we're not for profit, and that puts some pretty hard constraints on us on what we can do and how much others can influence us. So real quick, as a quick sort of rundown of how we exist in the first place, EPFL very graciously provided some seed funding so we could hire the first 2 people, and beyond those 2 people, we're funded directly from donations by companies. So when you see somebody is an advisory board member or some kind of industrial affiliate, this is them donating to this vision of having some sort of steward to Scala. And actually, I underline donations because this little bit is crucial. It means that by becoming a corporate member and contributing to the Scala Center, companies can't. It's donations. It's charitable donations. Companies can't invoke Scala Center staff to implement things for them, for example. The idea is that the Scala Center needs to, as a member of a university and as a not-for-profit, it has to always remain independent. It can't be a contracting vessel. So every transaction is actually really scrutinized by the university to ensure that it's a charitable donation, which means that all membership documents and everything is checked by EPFL's finance department before the university will even agree to receiving any sort of money. So really, money that comes in, it has to be effectively a charitable donation. And I like this wording. This kind of says it the nicest. This is in one of our membership documents. Basically, it says the Scala Center has been created as an independent, not-profit organization within EPFL. Our independence from commercial interest is protected by the statute through the Swiss federal restriction that our funding must be made as charitable donations for us to receive contributions in their entirety, not linked to any particular initiative. This ensures objectivity in and accountability for our decision making and allows us to focus on our overall mission, which, like I said, is the benefit of everybody and not one company's bottom line. I think that's really important to remember. So, that said, well, what do corporate members get for their donations? Well, they get the right to stay in the loop on everything that we're doing. The guarantee of some kind of progress for us. We're going to do something for the community. We're going to show you that we're doing something for the community. And the ability to make recommendations about what they think is important. And for us to even listen to the recommendation, it has to be something for the good of everybody. It can't be implement this thing for us, right? So this is sort of the structure. So there's an advisory board, right? I alluded to there being an advisory board because there are companies that fund us. Well, how does that work? The advisory board is made up of representatives from the Scala Center, community representative or representatives, we'll talk about that later, and representatives from these organizations that are funding us. The community and corporate representatives, they vote on what they think is something we should spend our time on. So when we have these meetings, we discuss sort of what the Scala Center has been doing, what progress it's been making on its initiatives, and we discuss areas of concern that might need attention. So it's fine for a company to be like, hey guys, the documentation on this thing is really bad, and all of my developers need it. We've had to write in-house documentation. It would be really great if there was something publicly available for everybody. Can we centralize this or something, for example, right? And everybody talks about it and they're like, yeah, that's good for everybody, definitely. This is something that we should consider doing. And these are our recommendations. Again, in order for this to be something that the university will accept and for us to be a not-for-profit, we have to be able to decide which of these we can act on, if we act on any of them, basically. So we have to remain independent, but yet at the same time, we're committed to being completely transparent. In fact, we post all documents related to the advisory board meetings in a GitHub repository, which you can look at right now. We don't have minutes up yet. We had a meeting yesterday afternoon, right before Martin's keynote. There'll be meetings in the next few days, but if you'd like to read more about how this process should take place, you can see our agendas, minutes, proposals, that advisory members are like, hey, we think this is important. And everything else related to these meetings. Here, there's nothing being withheld. Everything is in the open. And just to sort of summarize, yesterday, like I said, we had our first meeting to show you what people are suggesting. I think that so there was one other minor point that was adding a position. It's like a meta point. Otherwise, these are the main initiatives that we discussed yesterday. And I think one that everybody will agree with is this idea that we should improve the governance of community processes. So SIPs, SLIPs, like this should be much better than it currently is. It should be revitalized. So this is one of the initiatives put forth by the advisory board yesterday. Another is clarifying the Scala to Dotty migration path. Maybe somebody wants to adopt Dotty eventually. We should figure out how somebody who is using Scala 2.x can get there. Perhaps the Scala Center should care about migration tools to try and help that transition happen. And there are many people who are now depending on Scala.js. So one suggestion was, well, we should try to make sure that Scala.js doesn't die because of some funding burp, for example. So these are the sorts of things that we're discussing. And I hope you agree that these are generally interesting for everybody. And so wait, what about LightBin, you might ask? Well, it's good. Everything is fine. We work together, orthogonally. So as you might have guessed, LightBin will still maintain the stable Scala release. Instead of jumping on that train and we're going to start with libraries and the Scala ecosystem, and other things that we're looking at taking care of or focusing some effort on are other orthogonal areas of interest like Dotty or any of the alternative backends. So Scala.js or perhaps Scala native one day when it sort of matures a little bit, right? So this is sort of how we position ourselves. And we hope to work together with the compiler team at LightBin. Okay. Nitty-gritty details over. I think I would like to now talk to you about some of the projects that we're working on. This is more exciting, I think. So I have a question for people. What do Node, Haskell, and Rust have in common that Scala doesn't? Well, yes. Somebody said, well, I think everybody knows that we're going to do this anyway. This isn't a secret. So the secret is a package index or manager or something about packages, right? We believe very much that if you develop an open source library and you publish it to Maven or something else, you shouldn't have to be a good salesman to get your library used by people. If it does its job well, it should just be used by people. You shouldn't have to be a really popular kid to make people use it. And unfortunately, you have to be right now because there's no way to find Scala libraries. You can just search around on GitHub, but that doesn't mean anything is published there, right? So we think it's a really good idea to put together a package index. We should make it a lot easier for users to find libraries. And that's my idea of what it looks like when you sell things. So you shouldn't have to look like that guy. I mean, at least you shouldn't have to wear a cowboy hat. So we want to give a voice to these great projects that exist and that are out there that are bug-free and great, and they're just not being publicized, right? I mean, people should be able to find these things and use them. So introducing this thing that we're right now calling Scala Decks. At the moment, the idea is that it would be a package index for Scala. So we've actually already built this mostly. So we want to basically have a map of the known Scala ecosystem right now. What libraries are out there? What versions of Scala can I compile it with? What dependencies do these things have? So the idea is that it's based off of libraries that are published. And by published, of course, we mean to Maven, to Sonatype or Bintray. And we generate this index from info grabbed from Pom Files, grabbed off of GitHub, and eventually from other places like Stack Overflow as well. And we also want to make it possible for, this isn't an automagical tool completely by itself. People who own these libraries or packages should be able to update the configuration info about them to add, also we have this, you can't really see it, but community badges for linking these things from GitHub back to the package index, stuff like this. So the current status of this thing is that we've crawled Maven and collected all the known Scala libraries that exist. So if you've published something embarrassing, we might have collected it and indexed it. So just a heads up, okay? So we've done this. We have this data set. It was really difficult to do all this, to get all of this data, clean it up, and sort of generate some interesting things from it. So we've got that. It exists. And the next steps are really to put a nice UI on it and to try and figure out ways to show more meaningful bits of information. And I'd like to, I'm not the one building this. There are actually two of the guys who are building it here, and since they're here, I'm not going to steal their thunder by demoing what they've been working hard to build. My main contribution to this index was more backseat driving than anything, so I'd like to call them up real quick to show you a little demo of what they have so far. So like I said, this is without the like super shiny, sparkly interface, but it already shows you some really interesting information, and I hope that you guys you like it. So maybe Guillaume Massé and John Priddy, you can come up and talk real quick about the current status of this thing.
I'm Guillaume Massé. I'm a janitor at the Scala Center. I'm taking care of all those libraries out there in the wild. And when I was a kid, I always thought that the janitor is the coolest job out there because they have a really big keychain and they have access to all the rooms. So what I'm doing now is unleashing what's out there on Maven Central. Okay, so let me show you the demo. All right. So the first thing, you can search for known libraries. For example, if I'm looking for the type level cats. All right, so you got a list of libraries. And this is the project page. A nice feature is that you can have the install string for SBD. We have the latest Scala doc available. So this is a cat GVM, but you also have cat score. So, all right. One thing that is also pretty nice is that you have the reverse dependencies. This means that you can find all the published project that depends on your library. For example, in the Akka HTTP project, we can find a torrent application right here. And it's GitHub repository. And this is actually pretty nice. It has a front end with a Scala.js video that you can see the torrent streaming. And this guy is based in North Korea, so I guess he doesn't have an Netflix account or something. So it's pretty cool to find like known libraries, but also to find some hidden gems like this, for example. All right, I'll pass it to John and to tell us how it works.
Thanks, Guillaume. Hi everyone, I'm John Pretty, and with Heather, Guillaume, Salah, and Joris, over the last few weeks we've been working on building this index, and it was a bit of a challenge. Our core data was coming from Maven, from Pom Files. Now, who here has looked at a Pom file at some point? So, I think almost every hand has gone up. They're in XML. The data is the data is not necessarily clean. It generally links, or is intended to link to some sort of version control, like a Git repository, or Subversion potentially. But there's no one's enforcing those links are correct. So we first of all had to grab all that data. We tried to get it from Maven Central, and we got rate limited, and we checked the terms of the license, and we're not allowed to do that. So that was a non-starter. So we spoke to Bintray. Bintray were very helpful. They gave us special dispensation to download all of the data from them and use it, because they're very much supporting what we're doing. They actually even provided additional APIs to make some of the tasks we do easier. So Bintray have been extremely helpful. But even having got all of those POMs, we had to make sense of the data we had and try and understand them. We did a little hack to try and judge what's a Scala project and what's not a Scala project by seeing if the project name ends in underscore 2.10 or 2.11. That turned out to be a reasonable heuristic for guessing whether something is Scala or Java. And then we had to try and link these back to GitHub and try and associate the data that was from the Pom files with the source repositories. And it's not a one-to-one mapping. Different versions link back to potentially different Git repositories. The data's a mess, and Guillaume spent a huge length of time trying to make sense of it, try to find out what the conventions were that people were using to organize their data and organize their projects. So we've made a first stab at it, and later on you'll be able to see. You can check your own projects and see how we've done in interpreting that. But it's not a perfect art. So this will be something which will improve over time as we sort of analyze how well we've done so far at creating these links. What we would like to do in the future is add more links and enable you as project owners and developers to correct data where it's incorrect. Pom files are of course immutable. Once they're published, you can't change them. They're out there forever. All of those embarrassing projects that Heather mentioned you might have, you can't get rid of them. So one thing we might like to provide is to give you the opportunity to fix links to your Git repositories, or even to mark your own project as deprecated, your own binaries as being deprecated, to put a label saying, don't use this. So these are all things you might like to add and embellish the data with. Links to Stack Overflow tags. So some projects are widely used to the point where Stack Overflow has tags devoted to them. There's no link to those tags from the data that's out there at the moment. So this is something you'll be able to add later. Links to keywords, so we can associate projects as being, for example, involved with parsing or XML or JSON. The JSON tag might have quite a lot of libraries in it. We would like to develop it further to provide additional ways of accessing the data. Guillaume showed you an early iteration of the front-end user interface. We'll do more work over the next few weeks on improving this and having a beautifully designed interface that will hopefully be ready by Scala Days in Berlin. So that's just over a month away. But additionally, there might be useful things you can do with a REST API or from a command line. So we'd like to explore, for example, providing a neat command line utility for example, just finding out what the latest version of a project is, getting its reverse dependencies, searching on keywords or by name. So that's a sort of vague idea of the plans we have, but we're interested in ideas. When we get to Scala Days, we will hopefully, Scala Days Berlin, should I say, the next one, we'll hopefully be in a state where we can release it both as a service for you to access and explore, but also to release the source code. And we are very keen to get contributions. Now, those can take two forms. One, you can contribute code. You can develop features and create a pull request. But we'd also like to engage with people and find out what you would find useful. We'd like to hear if you start using the index and find that actually we've done something wrong with the way your project is indexed or another project is indexed, the way we've grouped the versions or details like this. And I'm sure there will be, because of the sort of relatively low quality of the data we've started with, I'm sure there'll be lots of work for us to do in improving that going forwards. So just to sum up, the project is probably about halfway through. We will have the release ready, we hope, for about a month's time. And it's an open source project. We would love to get people involved, and I welcome everybody here to join in, to engage in the conversation and suggest ideas. Everything is possible. So we look forward to hearing those ideas.
Thanks, guys. So I'm happy that they were here and they could show it to you, and that I wasn't the one being like, "Look at this, I did this," because I didn't. Right? This was them. So. And also, there are other people who are just contributing their time. So, So Joris is a student. Salar is working in Washington D.C., I believe. They're just contributing their time and ideas and helping us with things like, integrating Scala.js and React or whatever. They've been contributing a lot of effort to this. So this has been a very cool start so far, I think. Thank you, guys. And as they mentioned, we're hoping for the release to be Scala Days Berlin. And I mean, John has already sort of alluded to some cool things that could happen. If there's an API available, you could imagine that there would be a way for, this point down here, Adrian Moores and I have already chatted about this potential possibility. It could be possible for the LightBin team to upgrade the community build to an ecosystem build, so that the new releases of Scala could be run against lots of libraries, and we could catch issues without you guys having to ever deal with it. That's really cool. Other ideas, being able to, when you're generating documentation, make some API requests and figure out exactly how to link your documentation to things that exist on the internet if it's not going to be fully static and in some directory somewhere, right? We can also make all kinds of other stuff available. These are all just ideas that we're realizing that we can now do, since we have this information available to us. We have artifacts and we have source code. We can imagine finding a way to parse and display important stuff that we get out of build files. Like, for example, we can put somewhere that, hey, this library, by the way, this library is like using experimental stuff. Just a heads up, if your company is kind of scared of that stuff, maybe you shouldn't use this library. We could put all kinds of things that we can get out of build files. Potentially, since we can, get back into the source code, we could, the sky is the limit with this sort of stuff. And yeah, as I mentioned, or as Guillaume showed, you can show like dependence. You can show how popular something is based on all of the libraries that are published that depend on it, right? So I think this is a cool project, and I hope it keeps on going the way it is. I'm really excited about it. That's one thing that we've been investing our time in on the side of the MOOCs, but there are a lot of other initiatives on the radar that I think will matter to people. So I think that we're going to be the ones ultimately charged with this task of separating out the Scala standard library into this notion of Scala core and Scala platform. I'm not going to talk a whole lot about that because Martin already mentioned it yesterday, but the idea is that the compiler has stabilized, and we're really happy about that, but our libraries have also kind of frozen along with it, and maybe they don't have to. We'd like to maybe open up these libraries to people outside of sort of the like stable compiler group. There should be maybe a way to define what is core and what is platform, and separate these things into those spaces, and also maybe must-have libraries that 90% of projects use. Maybe we should consider including this in this platform thing, even if we didn't develop it at EPFL ourselves, right? So this is the idea. This is currently a proposal and discussion. We're not going to go and do this without consulting with people. This is probably an initiative that we're going to take up in the nearest future. Another project that we were just trying to get started on. Do you guys know JS Fiddle? Have you guys learned JavaScript with that? Because that's how I figured out how JavaScript worked. Really, like every time I was confused by some crazy thing that it did, some guy was like, no, it's because, and then I got a link to a JS Fiddle, and this is rampant on Stack Overflow. This is how you learn JavaScript, right? Wouldn't it be really cool if people could program in Scala that way? And hopefully soon you can. So this is a project that we're hoping to try and take up and invest a little bit more effort in soon. But it's sort of the same idea. How do you run little Scala snippets in your browser? You could maybe even think about potentially using this as like an in-browser REPL in Scala Lang. We could do the same thing that people do with JS Fiddle on mailing lists and Stack Overflow, where you link to these things. Oh yeah, I know how to do that. Let me show you. Here's a link, right? And maybe we could even have much cooler documentation where we embed these fiddles in the documentation of libraries so that people can experiment with something, right? So this is the idea. We'd like to take something up like this very soon. We've already sort of started a little bit. So the author of this project is Otto Kroons. He, I think, forked Lee Howey's Scala.js Fiddle and tried to make this thing that he called Scala Fiddle more embeddable in different places, and you can, like use it in documentation and whatnot. And there's a guy named Jason Calvert who has been helping out with some of the design and the ideas a little bit, but again, we're trying to grow a little team around this and see if we can sort of do the same thing that we've been doing with the Scala Index with the Scala Fiddle project. Another project that we're going to very soon be taking up, as alluded to earlier on when I kind of summarized what happened in this advisory board meeting. Since we're just getting started, there's a lot for us to do still, but we're hoping to pick up, well, we plan to pick up the Sipslip process starting next month, and to try and revamp it a little bit, to rebuild excitement and make this process actually work again. Like I said, since we're just getting started and this is really early, I don't have a lot of concrete answers to how we're going to do that. But more soon on that front. And finally, I just want to point out, you can always be a part of what we're doing in some way. So there are a number of companies, individuals who've contributed funds. So these are our advisory board members, by the way. The companies listed up top, right? They're the ones that really believe in this idea of contributing to the overall sort of Scala community and ecosystem. But if you're a Scala shop, you don't have to give us money. Actually, what's more valuable are pull requests, ideas, getting involved in a project. That's more valuable than cash, in my opinion. So beyond the warm and fuzzy feeling that it gets you to contribute back to this language ecosystem that you use every day, you get a lot from it. Not only does your fix get back in, like the fix that you contributed get back in, like cycle back into what you're doing most likely. Getting involved in open source gives visibility and could really help with things like hiring if you're looking to hire new developers ever at some point. It's really cool to be involved in open source if that's the case. People are really interested in that sort of company, I've noticed, right? So, if you're a Scala shop or Scala freelancer, consider investing by contributing back in some way, whether that be, publishing your own library or contributing back to actual Scala and its standard library or contributing to somebody else's library. Get involved. That's what we would really like to see happen. So if you're a company and you want to ever contribute back, one cool idea is to allow your developers to spend a little bit of time giving back to some project in this ecosystem. And I'm going to wind down now, but I as John mentioned, I would really like to encourage people to get in touch and to talk to us. We're here for you guys, right? So at the moment we have this Gitter channel, which you can always visit, and it's kind of like at the moment a water cooler, a place where people sort of, oh yeah, this happened, and the course might be delayed, etc. We're giving updates on things, and people who are popping into this and then getting involved in one of our projects, basically. So if you'd like to get involved in one of the projects, it's a good entry point to it. You can also email us at this email address. And Bill Venners actually is the community representative at the moment on the advisory board. And you know, as such, he told me he'd really like to collect feedback from people. So if you ever want to complain about something, how it doesn't work and how it should be fixed in some way by the Scala Center, he's very graciously, you know, offered to be the guy you can come and talk to about these things. So you can always get in contact with him as well if you prefer to talk to him directly. And of course, if you forget his name, he's the guy at the Artemis stand who is sort of the main publisher behind the programming and Scala books. So you remember who he is. But that's about all I have for you. Thank you. I'm happy to answer any questions that you guys may have about, you know, anything Scala Center or in general. So thanks. Okay, so to try and summarize the question, basically the question was, well, first we observed that the Scala not Scala ecosystem, but developing in Scala in general, Scala is a very unopinionated language. There's a wide variety of styles one could choose to use, and as a result, you have like this divergence of sort of accepted styles and disagreements and whatnot. And you ask, is there any plan from the Scala Center to try and guide people towards some way of doing things so there's less maybe friction at some point? Is that a good summary? That's a really good point, and unfortunately, we don't have any sort of active initiative or project or anything to do that. That's not to say that we'll never do anything. That's to say that maybe we should start a conversation about something like this. I'm not sure exactly the best way to do it, right? Because this isn't like a SIP or a SLIP or one of these proposals to the language. This is like a process suggestion. So it's almost like we need a process for a process suggestion. I know it sounds crazy, but you are not the only person, of course. I mean, I'm sure, you know, we've all gone around to different companies and have seen sort of the ridiculous divergence in how people do things and sort of best practices at individual companies. And I unfortunately have no answer for that other than, yes, it is really important. Everybody cares about it and we should do something about it. But exactly what we have to sort of maybe work out together as a community. And we're open to doing something about it. Exactly what I don't have the authority to say. That's for everybody. So yes, I hope so. I hope we can do something about it at some point. I wish that was a more concrete answer. Yep. So this is basically ready to launch. We're waiting basically at, what, 2.5, 3 weeks for it to go live, mostly because Coursera is testing and double checking that everything looks good before they make it public. But it's about ready to be released. And if you'd like to, you know, a reminder about when it is released, I would go to that the Scala Center webpage and sign up and put your name on the mailing list, because we'll send out an email to let you know when it is live, finally, if you're interested in that. Is that the question that you had? Reactive extension? No, there's no reactive extensions. It's basically just like monads and futures and things right now. So nothing major, no major topics that I didn't list on that slide. It's not that we don't ever plan on having that material again, it's just that we don't have a clear plan for integrating it into our current course material. That doesn't mean it's not going to come back. Who are the companies? Yeah, so back on this slide, these are the companies. So the one, all the logos on the top of the slide. Except EPFL, we can't be on the advisory. We're there, you know, in presence at the advisory board. But these are the official advisory board companies. So they're all very different. They all have very large commitments to Scala and need it to survive for, you know, lots of things to exist as it is. But you know, we have everything from consulting companies to, as you can see, a bank, IBM. So this is mostly the IBM Spark Technology Center because Spark is based in Scala, of course. So these are sort of the companies who say, yeah, we think whatever is important, this or that. And I mean, you'll be able to see in a few days exactly which initiative, which company proposed. You can see all of the details of this meeting that we had. There's, like I said, totally everything is in the open. There's a GitHub repository. I showed it on a previous slide, but it's pretty easy to remember. It's Scala Center/advisory board. So this is going to be part of this Sipslip initiative. We're not going to just do this and not follow protocol. So one, we're going to update this Sipslip process. There's a number of repositories, well, there's one repository where all of these proposals are sitting, and we have maybe Seth, do you know where the announcements are made for the Sipslip meetings? There's like a Twitter announcement or something that Josh makes sometimes. He's like tweeting that we're having a meeting. It's an on-air Hangouts, so you can just like pop in and like listen to it and ask questions live during it. You could also watch it offline on YouTube. But do you remember where he's announcing it, or is he just announcing it on his personal? Okay, so basically we are announcing it, but in an irregular fashion on different, I don't know, Twitter versus Gitter. So it's a good point. We should probably standardize on, hey, hitting up the mailing list, Scala internals, and then maybe tweeting from Scala Lang that we're doing it, in an hour, and you can join, and here's the link. We should do that next. But in general, there's always these Sipslip meetings that you can sit down or you can join because they're on air, and you can post questions, and we answer those questions during the meeting. Did you guys know about that, by the way? Who knew about that existing? Basically nobody. So obviously we need to do a better job at publicizing that this is happening. But it does happen, and you can also look at old meetings on YouTube. Thank you guys for coming. I really appreciate it.